What's up everyone? Today I want to discuss something a little more casual than my usual videos or guides. I just want to go through my thought process behind team building. So absolutely none of what I'm going to cover today is going to be the perfect way to team build. This isn't necessarily a guide. It's just my personal thought process, and every person builds teams differently, and that's fantastic. Hopefully this short video will give you some ideas or help you improve your team building. And of course, this, as I said, this isn't the only way to team build. If you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to point out, maybe something I missed, maybe something I don't know, definitely leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I'm also trying to use this as a learning experience as well. So with that, firstly, what I usually do is, well, of course I have to choose my monotype format here. We go to add Pokemon, and the first thing you have to do is decide what type you want to play. So for most players, this probably isn't an issue because most players have a favorite type in mind or a type they want to play. But in my case, there's so many types I like playing, so I like playing every type, to be honest. So in my case, I have to kind of decide what type I want to play. And in this case, let's just say water, because water is a cool type. Now, if you are struggling with what type you want to play, I've linked a beginner's guide to choosing a type down below, so hopefully that will help you choose the type you want to play. So the first thing I do when actually starting to build my team is I think, what's going to be the kind of gimmick of my team? What's the glue to the team? What's its purpose? So on a water team, for example, that would be rain. Maybe on a poison team, it's toxic spikes. Maybe on a rock team, it's sandstorm. But right here, I know my purpose is rain. So I'm gonna look up what Pokemon get drizzle. And immediately I see Pelipper. Now don't worry too much that Pelipper's OU and Politoed's below UU. I've had people ask before, like, oh, is it okay to use Politoed even though it's below PU? I'm like, yeah, of course it is. The Monotype meta is completely different to OU. So even if a Pokemon is below PU, they still can technically be viable. In this case, however, I'm going to go for Pelipper because its flying typing is pretty nice on a water team. So usually what I do next is I'm going to look for team members who complement my lead. For example, this case, I complement a rain team. And I decide if my team is going to be offensive or defensive in nature. In this scenario, just for this, I'm going to build kind of a mix because water is so good with both. So I don't even have to look far. I looked at a new Pokemon and I see, oh, Barraskewda has Swift Swim, it's a water type, really good attack stat, really good speed. So immediately I know this thing is really good offensive presence. And as I said, Swift Swim to double its speed in the rain, so this complements Pelipper quite well. So this can be a really strong physical attacker, for example. Now with that in mind, when I'm looking for a offensive core, I like Pokemon that obviously have good offensive stats. Decent speed is always nice unless I'm running a bulky offensive team. And of course, coverage is super important. And we know, well, I know close combat, Barraskewda gets great coverage, gets close combat. Poison Jab, does it get Iron Head? No, it doesn't. No, I thought it did. Drill Run can be pretty nice. Ice Fang, it obviously gets powerful Water Stab and Liquidation, which is boosted further by the rain, Psychic Fang. So already Barraskewda has kind of earned a spot on my team. So Barraskewda is going to be my physically offensive Pokemon, but I want a specially offensive Pokemon too. So what I do in this case is I type in water here and click special attack. We can see there's some pretty good special attackers. There's actually plenty of good special attackers on the water team. So in this scenario, I'm actually going to go for a second Swift Swim user, or look for a second Swift Swim user. So if I look up Swift Swim water type special attack, it shows us the highest special attacking Swift Swim Pokemon. Now, Kingdra isn't amazing, but its base 85 speed is significantly better than Omastar's base 55, even though it's significantly weaker. I'm going to go for Kingdra, as well as its Dragon typing is pretty nice. So with this, we have two Swift Swim users, and again, I know this thing gets really good coverage. It gets Draco Meteor, Hurricane. Hurricane also can't miss in the rain, which is really good because it gets rid of flying types, which are pretty annoying for the team. What else we can get? Ice Beam, Surf, generally goes quite strong. And as well as that, we can see this thing is pretty specially offensive. Not the best, but it's very fast in the rain, so we're going to give this specs to patch up its decent special attack. So the next thing I always look at is speed control. Does my team have speed control? Immediately I can see yes it does. I have 2 Swift Swim users even outside of rain. If we want to make Barraskewda max attack, Barraskewda is very strong and very fast. So we don't necessarily need too much more speed control. Though speed control comes in a whole variety of ways. You can get sticky web support, Prankster Thunder Wave, Trick Room, Speed Boost, Weather, Choice Scarf, just to name a few. The list really does go on. So with these 2 added, I know I have a pretty good offensive core. I have a good special attacker, I have a good physical attacker. Maybe I want to make him Life Orb because I already have a choice locked user. I don't want too many. So with these, I can see immediately off the bat, I'm not too great against electric types. So let's look up water types who have either Volt Absorb, and I'm pretty sure there's a few. Volt Absorb. We have Lantern. Pretty good. Stats maybe aren't the best. Let's look up a ground type instead. We have a plethora of options. Personally, I wanted one with Stealth Rocks if possible, because generally ground types get these. So we see Seismitoad and Swampert. And in this case, I think I'm going to go for Swampert, as he offers a little bit more defenses across the board, a little less HP, but a little more defense, a little more special defense, a bit slower. That's okay. So we're going to go for Swampert, and immediately we can put on Stealth Rocks on Swampert. So right now we have a good coverage to ground types. Sorry, electric types with my ground type, and we also have entry control hazards. So speaking of entry hazards, we need a way to actually deal with entry hazards. So my team doesn't particularly like sticky webs, like we don't really want Barraskewda or Kingdra getting sticky webbed. We don't necessarily want to be worn away by toxic spikes or spikes over time. So I'm going to look up what water types maybe get defog. And immediately I can see, oh, Pelipper does, so I'm just going to go back here and put defog on my Pelipper, which is pretty good. So with that in mind, so far the offensive presence is looking pretty good because it's thinking against Earthquake, for example, Flip Turn for grabbing momentum, and it's generally just decently strong and quite bulky too. So my offensive is looking pretty good, but defensively I'm a little on the frail side, so now I want to look into building maybe a defensive core. So what I like to do here is look at Pokemon that have good defense, and then look at Pokemon that have good special defense. So again, we type in water here, and we can click defense, and it shows us the list of most defensive Pokemon. So Cloyster is clearly the best by a large margin with 180, but bear in mind Toxapex gets Regenerator, which is so amazing. Also, Toxapex is part poison type, meaning grass types are going to have a hard time breaking it. And right now I have 3 resistances to grass, or 3 neutralities to grass, which is really good, and a immunity to electric. So definitely Toxapex would be my go-to physically defensive Pokemon here, because I do get Regenerator. So next up, let's look for a physically defensive Pokemon, or specially defensive Pokemon, sorry. Again, I'm going to type in water, especially defensive. Toxapex shows up at the top again, surprise, surprise. Kyogre is banned. Mantine's really good, especially because it gets Roost. But it is flying type, so it is weak to Stealth Rock, and I already have a flying type on my team in Pelipper. I don't necessarily know if I want another 4x weakness to electric on the team. Let's look down further down the list, and Tapu Fini kind of takes my interest because it's really especially defensive. Also has decent defenses, and has Misty Surge. And so Misty Surge is pretty good for blocking status on my team. Maybe I don't want my Swampert to get burnt by Will-O-Wisp, or my Barraskewda to get burnt. I don't want my Kingdra getting paralyzed because that makes it way worse as a Swift Swimmer. So the Misty Surge is pretty good for that, which is quite good. So as well as that, Fairy is a nice defensive typing. It gives you an immunity to dragons, gives you resistance to bug, other nice things like that. And the weakness to Steel isn't a bad thing because the rest of my team resist it. The weakness to Poison isn't necessarily bad because Swampert and Toxapex resist it as well. So Fairy is actually a decently complementing team. Now when I have that all done, I like to look over to see if I can reasonably check my weaknesses. As I said earlier, in this case I can. I have an electric immunity in Swampert and a neutrality in Kingdra. I have 3 grass neutralities in Pelipper, Swampert and Toxapex. And I am lucky in the case that water is so good in that regard, but not every team will be able to check all their weaknesses. Sometimes it's better to cut your losses and accept you're probably going to do badly against a couple of types. That's okay, it's completely okay. Not every type is as good defensively as water. So now that I have my 6 Pokemon chosen, I would go through them now and put all moves on my team, which I'm not going to do now because this isn't necessarily a guide to building mono water. It's just, it's just what I would do to build a team. But I know I have my physically offensive Pokemon, I have my specially offensive Pokemon, I have a decent defensive core here in these 3, and Pelipper can get Roost too, which is good for longevity. So with that in mind, I want to go through a couple of mistakes that I always make when I'm building teams. So I want to share these with you to make sure, or hope that maybe you don't make these same mistakes too. So the first one is oversaturation of stab. Sometimes I put way too many of one attack on my team. This is particularly bad on team types that aren't necessarily that good offensively. Maybe bug. Maybe I end up with 6 or 7 bug type moves on my team, a bug team. And to be honest, I don't really need that many. Bug isn't the best offensively. I'd rather go for more coverage in a case like that. On this team, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have too much coverage because stab, because water is really good. So maybe I'm going to have one liquidation here. I'll go for surf here. I flip turn here, and maybe I'm gonna go for U-turn to grab momentum and scald. Actually, I'm gonna go for hurricane because it's really good in the rain. So right now you can see I only actually have 2 proper offensive water moves, and flip turn forcing me to swap out, so it's also not that strong. So maybe in this case this is probably under saturation of stab, which will be the next thing I want to discuss, which is when I don't put enough stab on a team. I very often come across this case in things like poison teams, for example. When I'm building poison, I think, oh, it's only super effective on 2 types, I don't really need that many poison attacks, so I often only put maybe 1 or often 0 poison attacks on the team, and in that situation fairy actually becomes kind of a hard matchup for me because I don't have any way to deal with them, and they often run psychic coverage. So in this case, maybe I'm going to run actually there's no point running Scald on Tapu Fini because I can't Scald burn with the Psychic Nipsey Surge up, so I'd rather that immediate bit more power of Surf. And I guess we can always run Scald maybe here on Swampert to try spread burns because burn is so good. So my next point is setup, and I think it's fair to say most players love seeing big damage, and what better way to do that than maybe clicking Nasty Plot 3 times or Swords Dance 3 times and sweeping Dragon Dance 6 times. It's so fun, I can't deny that, but I do often have the problem where I put too much setup on the team, and this can often be a bad thing because if my opponent has maybe Unaware, or it has phasing like Roar, Whirlwind, or it has Haze, often cases like that, my team can crumble then if I have way too much setup on the team and I'm relying too much on getting these to kill, getting KOs by clicking Dragon Dance 6 times. So not usually a decent middle ground for this is choice locked items, because they offer that immediate bit of power to hopefully break through your opponent's defensive cores. Especially in Monotype, they're really good because teams often share a weakness, so having for example, Specs, Hurricane, and Kingdra is really good against fighting teams because pretty much the entire team is going to be at least taking neutral damage to it, which is super nice. That said, I personally don't generally like to have too much choice locked items on a team. Generally 1 or 2 is fine, sometimes 3 in a case that I'm using a heavy choice locked team. So in this case I could actually change this to Bandit if I want that immediate bit more power. Now, what I said earlier about not having too much setup, this team has not enough setup. So if a defensive Pokemon can wall out Kingdra and Barraskewda, that's pretty bad for me, so I definitely want some setup. And I know Tapu Fini is pretty good with Calm Mind. So Calm Mind lets me patch up my special attack, which is really good, especially if I want to go for a plus speed nature for a bit more speed control. Extra special attack stages are always usually really nice, and the extra special defense is pretty good too because this was my specially defensive Pokemon. So there are some common mistakes I go through when building teams. Now finally, the team building process isn't necessarily finished when you have 6 Pokemon filled out. At this point, what I would always recommend doing is testing your team out on ladder. There's usually always something wrong with my teams when I first build them, and it's easy to identify that when going into a game. Maybe I find Swampert's not really pulling its weight, maybe Seismitoad for some reason will be better, and that's completely okay. Feel free to switch Pokemon out as you see fit. There's no shame in asking for help, looking up guides, resources, there's plenty of them out there, and I'd highly recommend doing so if you want to try and improve. With that said, if you have any questions at all about team building, feel free to ask me on this channel. I'm happy to help in any way I can. So all this was hopefully useful to you. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this. It's definitely a more casual discussion than my usual guides. It wasn't like I typically go through maybe the best things or like useful tips for this team. This is just kind of my thought process, and hopefully you can learn something from that. If you did like this, let me know. I really do appreciate the support. It helps me grow a lot. It helps me see what kind of content you like to see from my channel. And with that said, I hope you have a fantastic day and take care.